I harbor no hope, nor do I presume, that anyone will believe the monstrous, and yet disturbingly mundane tale I am about to recount. Only a madman could expect such faith, for even I find it impossible to believe what has occurred. But I am not mad, and this is no dream. Tomorrow I shall be dead, and tonight I must unburden my soul through confession. My sole intention is to speak plainly, briefly, and without affectation about a series of events that, though seemingly domestic, have brought me nothing but horror, have drained me, destroyed me. And yet I will not seek explanation. I have known fear, though many may find these events no more troubling than the wildest of fancies. Perhaps, in time, a wiser, colder, more logical mind, less impressionable than mine, will discern in what I tremble to describe nothing more than a chain of natural causes and effects. From early childhood I was known for my gentleness and obedience. A tenderness of spirit so evident that my peers often mocked me for it. I had a particular fondness for animals, and my parents did not hinder me from keeping pets. I spent every free moment with them, and felt a kind of bliss when feeding or caressing them. As I grew older, this trait only deepened, and in adulthood, few things brought me greater joy. Anyone who has known the devotion of a loyal and intelligent dog needs no explanation of the warmth such creatures return. In the selfless, unwavering love of an animal there is something that touches the heart of anyone who has tasted the treachery and falsehoods of mankind. I married young, and was fortunate to find in my wife a kindred spirit. She shared my affection for animals and often sought to please me. Our home was filled with birds, goldfish, a pedigree dog, rabbits, a monkey and a cat. The cat was unusually large, strikingly beautiful, and entirely black, without a single mark. He possessed a rare intelligence. When his cleverness was discussed, my wife, secretly inclined toward superstition, would sometimes allude to the old belief that all black cats were witches in disguise. Of course, she said this playfully, but I mention it now because the time has come to remember it. His name was Pluto, and he was my favorite. I often played with him, fed him myself, and at home he followed me everywhere. He even tried to accompany me outdoors, and I had to make a considerable effort to break him of the habit. Our friendship lasted several years, but over time my temperament, under the influence of the devil's temptation, changed drastically. I burn with shame as I admit this. I became moody, irritable, indifferent to the feelings of others. I shouted at my wife, and eventually raised my hand against her. My pets, too, suffered. I neglected them, and at times treated them cruelly. Only Pluto retained some measure of my respect. I refrained from harming him, unlike the rabbits, the monkey, and even the dog, whom I struck without remorse when they came near me. But the disease, there is no affliction more terrible than addiction to alcohol, progressed, and even Pluto, now aged and more temperamental, began to suffer under my worsening disposition. One night, returning home in a drunken stupor from one of my usual haunts, I imagined the cat was avoiding me. I seized him, and he, frightened by my aggression, bit me lightly, but drew blood. In that instant, a demon of rage possessed me. I lost all control. It was as if my soul fled my body, and a fury more savage than hell itself, stoked by gin, consumed me entirely. I drew a penknife from my vest pocket, opened it, gripped the poor creature by the throat, and gouged out his eye. I blush, I tremble, I recoil as I recount this vile atrocity. The next morning, when reason returned and the fumes of drink had dissipated, I felt a mixture of remorse and dread. But it was a vague, fleeting sensation that left no lasting impression. I resumed drinking, and soon drowned even the memory of what I had done. The wound began to heal. The empty socket was grotesque, but the pain seemed to subside. He continued to roam the house, though now he fled in terror at the sight of me. My heart had not yet hardened completely, and at first I grieved that a creature once so devoted now clearly loathed me. But soon that grief gave way to bitterness. And then, as if to seal my doom, the spirit of perverseness awoke within me. Philosophers ignore it, but I am convinced it is one of the primal impulses of the human soul. Who has not committed a foolish or wicked act simply because it was forbidden? Who has not felt the urge to defy a law merely because it exists? This spirit of contradiction led me to my final downfall. An unfathomable urge to torment myself, to violate my own nature, to do evil for evil's sake. This drove me to complete the torture of the helpless creature. One morning, with chilling calm, I slipped a noose around Pluto's neck and hung him from a tree. I hanged him, though tears streamed from my eyes and my heart ached with remorse. I hanged him because I knew he had once loved me. Because I felt the injustice of my act. Because I understood the gravity of the sin, a mortal sin that doomed my soul to a damnation so profound that, were it possible, it would plunge me into depths beyond the reach of even the mercy of the most merciful and most just God. That very night, after committing the deed, I was roused from sleep by a cry, "Fire!" The curtains around my bed were ablaze. The entire house was engulfed in flames. My wife, our servant, and I barely escaped with our lives. Everything we owned was reduced to ashes. I was left utterly ruined. From that day forward, despair became my constant companion. I had enough resolve not to seek a connection between the catastrophe and my own cruel deed. My aim is merely to trace the full chain of events, omitting not a single link, however doubtful it may seem. The day after the fire, I returned to the smoldering ruins. All the walls had collapsed, save one, a thin interior partition to which the head of my bed had once been pressed. The plaster on it had remained almost untouched. I attributed this to the fact that the wall had been freshly coated not long before. A crowd had gathered near it, and many eyes stared with greedy curiosity at a single spot. Exclamations like "strange" and "incredible" stirred my attention. I stepped closer and saw, on the pale surface, something resembling a bas-relief, the image of a gigantic cat. Around its neck was a rope. At first, this vision, for I can call it nothing else, filled me with horror and bewilderment. But after some reflection, I calmed myself. I remembered that I had hanged the cat in the garden beside the house. During the chaos of the fire, the garden had been flooded with people, and someone, perhaps trying to rouse me, had cut the rope and thrown the cat's body through the open window into my room. When the walls collapsed, the debris had pressed the corpse against the fresh plaster, and the heat, smoke, and vapors had etched its form into the surface. I soothed, if not my conscience, then at least my reason, by explaining the phenomenon thus. Yet it left a deep impression. For months, the ghost of the cat haunted me. A vague feeling returned to my soul, one that outwardly resembled remorse. I began to mourn the loss and searched through the sordid taverns where I now spent all my time for a similar cat, one of the same breed, to replace my former favorite. One night, in a vile establishment, I noticed something black atop one of the enormous barrels of gin or rum that made up most of the decor. For several minutes I stared at it, wondering how I had failed to notice such a strange object before. I approached and touched it. It was a black cat, large like Pluto, and so similar to him it was as if they were twins. The only difference was a dirty white patch on its chest. When I touched it, the cat sprang up, purred loudly, and rubbed against my hand, as if delighted by the attention. I had been searching for just such a creature. I offered to buy it, but the owner refused payment. He had no idea where the cat had come from and claimed never to have seen it before. I stroked it continuously, and when I left, it clearly wished to follow me. I did not object. On the way home, I bent down repeatedly to pet it. At home, it quickly made itself comfortable and immediately became my wife's favorite. But soon I began to feel a growing aversion toward it. This was unexpected. Its obvious affection stirred in me only irritation and disgust. Gradually, these feelings hardened into bitter hatred. I avoided the cat, and only a faint sense of shame and the memory of my past crime kept me from harming it. Weeks passed, and I never struck it, never laid a finger on it. Yet slowly, inexorably, a loathing took root in me, and I began to shun the creature as one might a plague. I hated it all the more when I discovered that, like Pluto, it was missing one eye. But to my wife, this made it even dearer. She had preserved the gentleness that once had been mine and had brought me such simple, pure joys. And still, the more I hated it, the more it clung to me. It followed me with unbearable persistence. If I sat down, it would crawl under my chair or leap into my lap, tormenting me with its repulsive caresses. If I stood to leave, it would tangle itself in my legs, nearly tripping me, or dig its claws into my clothes and climb onto my chest. In those moments, I longed to kill it, but was held back by the memory of my former guilt, and, I confess, by fear. Not fear of any tangible misfortune. I struggle to name the feeling otherwise. I am ashamed to admit, even now, behind bars, that the horror the cat inspired in me was intensified by the most impossible delusion. My wife often pointed out the pale patch on its chest, the only visible difference between this creature and my victim. The reader may recall that the patch was fairly large, though indistinct. Slowly, imperceptibly, it took on a clearer shape. And now, let it be known, it revealed something dreadful, a gallows. That blood-red, ominous instrument of suffering and doom. From that moment, I became the most miserable of men. This loathsome beast, so like the one I had slain without hesitation, inflicted upon me, a man made in the image of the Almighty, torments beyond endurance. Alas! Day and night I knew no peace. By day, the cat never left my side. By night, I awoke from nightmares to feel its hot breath on my face and its weight, a living nightmare, pressing upon my heart. These torments drove out the last remnants of goodness from my soul. I cherished only thoughts of malice, the blackest, most twisted thoughts the human mind can conjure. Of all who suffered from my sudden, frequent, and uncontrollable fits of rage, none endured more than my silent, long-suffering wife. She bore everything without complaint, and her quiet resilience only deepened my madness. One day, on some domestic errand, we descended together into the cellar of the old house where poverty had forced us to live. The cat, as usual, followed me down the steep staircase. I stumbled, nearly breaking my neck, and in a frenzy of rage, I seized an axe. In that moment, I forgot the fear that had previously restrained me and was ready to strike the creature with a blow that would have ended its life. But my wife intervened, stopping my hand. In a fury that eclipsed even the wrath of the devil, I broke free and cleaved her skull. She collapsed without a sound. Having committed this monstrous murder, I set about concealing the body with icy calm. I knew I could not carry it out of the house, neither by day nor under cover of night, without risking discovery. My mind swarmed with schemes. First, I considered dismembering the corpse and burning it in the furnace. Then I thought to bury it in the cellar. The idea of throwing it into the well, or hiding it in a crate and hiring a porter to remove it also crossed my mind. But in the end, I settled on what seemed the most effective solution, to wall the body up within the cellar, as medieval monks were said to have done with their victims. The cellar was perfectly suited to the task. The walls had been hastily constructed and recently plastered, though the dampness had kept the coating from fully drying. One wall featured a recess where a fireplace had once stood, later bricked up and plastered over. I was confident I could remove the bricks, conceal the body, and reseal the wall so that no eye, however keen, would detect anything amiss. I was not mistaken. With a crowbar, I easily dismantled the masonry, placed the body upright against the inner wall, and carefully replaced the bricks. With utmost precision, I prepared a plaster mixture indistinguishable from the original and sealed the wall thoroughly. When I was done, the repair was flawless. I swept the floor clean, leaving not a trace of debris. Surveying the cellar with triumphant satisfaction, I said to myself, "This time, my efforts have not been in vain." Afterward, I began searching for the creature that had brought so much ruin upon me. I was determined to destroy it. Had the cat appeared then, its fate would have been sealed. But the cunning beast, frightened by my recent fury, had vanished as if into thin air. I cannot describe the profound relief I felt upon realizing it was gone. That night, for the first time since its arrival, I slept soundly. Yes, I slept, despite the weight of my crime pressing on my soul. A second day passed, then a third, still no sign of the cat. I breathed freely. The monster had fled for good. I would never see it again. What bliss! Remorse? No, I gave it no thought. A brief inquiry was conducted, but I had no difficulty exonerating myself. Even a search was made, naturally, nothing was found. I was certain, peace was mine at last. On the fourth day after the murder, the police returned unexpectedly. They began a thorough inspection of the house. I remained perfectly calm, the hiding place was secure. I was asked to accompany them. They examined every corner, every crevice. At last, for the third or fourth time, they descended into the cellar. I did not flinch. My heart beat as steadily as that of a righteous man. I strolled about the cellar, arms folded, pacing slowly back and forth. When they finished and prepared to leave, I could not resist. My heart swelled with triumph, and I longed to say something, to dispel any lingering doubt. "Gentlemen," I said, as they ascended the stairs, "I'm glad to have laid your suspicions to rest. I wish you good health, and perhaps a touch more courtesy. By the way, this is a fine construction," I added, scarcely aware of my own words. "I'd even say it's exceptional. In the masonry of these walls, are you in a hurry, gentlemen? There's not a single crack." And, intoxicated by my own recklessness, I struck the very section of wall where my wife's corpse lay hidden with the cane I held in my hand. God help me, deliver me from the claws of Satan. No sooner had the echoes of my blows faded than a voice answered from within the wall. At first muffled and broken, like the cry of a child, it quickly swelled into a prolonged, piercing scream, a howl, a wail so wild and unearthly, so full of terror and triumph, that it could only have come from the depths of hell, where the damned shriek and demons rejoice. Mad with horror, I staggered back against the opposite wall. The officers froze on the stairs, paralyzed by shock. But in the next instant, a dozen hands tore at the bricks. The wall collapsed. There, revealed to all, stood the corpse of my wife, already decaying, her blood congealed and blackened. And upon her head, its jaws agape and its single eye gleaming, sat the loathsome beast, the very creature that had driven me to murder, and now, with its infernal cry, had betrayed me to justice. I had walled it up in the tomb.